Hornby's new Mark III coaches feature the ability to easily add battery-based coach lighting, and their Maglight product does just that, albeit at a price. So how easy is it to install, and how does it compare to the other lighting options that are out there? It's time to take a closer look. Hi, so thanks for joining today's video. We'll kick off with looking at a brief installation of the Maglight product into one of the Mark III coaches that I recently reviewed. We'll then do a review of the lighting and do a comparison against some of the other coach lighting options that are out there. We'll follow that with taking a look at the community poll results, which is basically some questions that I asked in a poll with regard to people's preferences on coach lighting. We'll follow that with a summary and our usual recommendation. And we have a bonus section at the very end, which looks at the Bachmann coaches, which provide pickups pre-installed on the coaches. These are basically their DCC lighted coaches that have the DCC element and lighting removed, but do retain the pickups that you can use to add your own lighting. So we'll do a review of those at the very end. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at this Maglight lighting unit from Hornby, and this is to support on these various Mark III coaches, the new ones, and we'll take a look at the coach in a minute to install it. So just to get the actual part number there, which is the R7305 Maglight lighting unit for Mark III coaches. There's versions for other coaches. So let's take a look at what you get out of the box with this. So there's instructions in here. So let's just take those out as well. And we'll see what we have. It looks like to be an awful lot here. Oh, here we go. Okay, so it talks about removing the body, which we're going to do. And it talks about the overall installation. And once we get this up and running, then we'll do some measurements of the lighting. We'll take a look at it on the layout and we'll compare it to two alternatives. I'm going to compare it to the Bachmann Mark II coaches, the DCC lighted coaches from Bachmann. I'm also going to compare it to the upgraded coach lighting that we did on the Acura scale. That was the Mark V's, so which would be a custom lighting job essentially. So we'll take a look at that as well and look at the comparisons between them. Okay, so let's get this guy opened up first. So this is what's going to go up into the roof. So it does fit the length of the coach. That gives you a look at the strip. Looks like a kind of a custom strip that they have. Yeah, they've got the part number on it. Don't know that they needed a custom strip. They could have probably just used some other off-the-shelf strips, but never mind. And then we've got the connection into the battery. Okay, so we've got to get the coach open so that we can start taking a look at this. We'll start the fitting process. So I'm going to take this out because we'll be putting in the compartment for this. So a small little screw there, don't want to lose that. Okay, so I'm just going to lift this guy out. There we go. Alright, just give ourselves the space. Okay, so we'll open up the coach. So we want to take a look inside. So that's our next step. So let's get a nail in there. So these coaches come open up pretty easily, and this one does. Okay, that's fine. All right. So it has this bar across the top. Okay. So that's obviously designed to take the strip. So let's just see what we get in the instructions. Yeah, that's where we're going to stick on the on that piece. So that's good. So we're going to do that. Okay, so I've got a smaller little Phillips screwdriver, so I can take this guy off. Okay, so you just lift off. The side where you do the installation here is going to depend on the location of the battery compartment, because the wires are only so long. So that's what's going to kind of determine where you locate it, because you're not going to have to lift up the base. So we're going to have to unscrew this as well. So we got a screw here. him out of the way for the moment. Okay, so we can see our little return spring here for the... so we just need to make sure that that stays in place when we put everything back together. Okay, so we're going to get this guy onto the roof. Let's do this first, and we'll need to get him out. Okay, that goes in pretty quickly. So we're going to take off the strip here. So we're going to stick this guy on the roof to get him on. It's quite sticky actually, so just want to make sure you get it on the right location when you put it on. It is sticky actually. That's not going to go anywhere, I think, so you've put it on like that. Okay, now, so we've got to feed this up through the body. You can do this, I suppose, before or after you've actually installed this. The instructions kind of tell you to do it beforehand, but it's going to fit anyway, so it just brings it up through it like that. And so we're going to put this guy, fix him on here. Just get over here now so we can get this in place. And get our little screw in here to kind of hold it all together. So make sure there's no wires there. Okay, looks fine. I'll just put the screw in over the other side just to hold it all down. So I think it's quite a nice idea having this extra strip across the top rather than fitting the stuff into the roof of the cab, which is kind of what you'd be probably doing normally. Alright, so actually we've got plenty of slack on the wire here actually, so we're going to have a bit to spare. So we want to fit this guy in here. So we'll just leave him like that for the moment, and I think we need to try to get the rest of this back together again. Okay, so we have actually some slack in the wiring, so there's a bit of a conduit there to route the wiring along. If you had some tape or some black tack or something like that, you could actually just kind of hold this in place. Okay, so we're just going to try to get this end tacked down, so we're going to just get those wires in there. And what we want to make sure to do is to get the couplers in the right position, so these need to be flat like that before we put in the screw. So make sure he's good to go. He is. That's fine. I'm just going to do the same on the other side. Coupler's working fine. That's fine. Okay, I think we can put the body back on. Or maybe we might actually just check the light first before we do that. That might be a good idea. So I'm going to pop in the battery. So it's positive. Positive. So we'll slide him in there. Give him a bit of pressure. Get him in. That's it. Okay, so he's all together there. Okay, so let's just see about turning her on now. So we've got the battery in, and so we should be able to get him on. There we go. Let there be light. So there is light. Hard to tell. Obviously I'm in kind of bright lights here for the photography, so it's I can't quite tell what this looks like in terms of you know, what it would look like on the track. So we're going to have to put the cover back on. I'll turn this guy off. We'll put this all back together again, and what we're going to do then is put it on the track, look at what in the sort of lighting conditions on the track. Now there'll be the kind of lighting conditions I normally photograph in, so they will still be a little bit bright. and then we'll do our comparisons. I'll probably do a little bit of a light measurement as well. I've got a light meter knocking around somewhere, so we'll do that. Okay, before we go anywhere, let's just take a quick look at our coach. We've got everything put back together again. We've got the lights turned on there. You can just see them inside. They look nice and even, and they kind of look, I suppose, realistic in terms of being real lights. It does look a little dull, so I say we'll see what that looks like on the track, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so we've just put the coach on the track and we've turned the lighting on with our wand. And I think my first impressions are pretty good. This actually looks pretty decent, and I would certainly say it's comparable with the other kind of bespoke or custom coach lighting jobs that I've done in the past. So it does look good. It does show up the interiors, and I guess that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. You know, these interiors, they're not really highly decorated. They're just kind of reasonably shiny plastic, and I think they could benefit from a little bit of work. But the overall starting point here isn't bad, and I think that's really important. So I did think it was a little bit dim, but I think it looks fine to me. I don't think I'd have an issue with this level of lighting. I know some people might like it a little bit brighter, some people even like it a little bit dimmer. But for me, I think this pretty well hits the mark, and we'll see how it compares now. So let's take a look at how it compares. So top here we have the Accurascale Mark 5s. Now I did adapt these because I wasn't happy with the lighting in them, and I did put in a separate LED strip, basically replacing what was there. And that's the lighting that you can see there, and it's not an awful lot different from what we've got with the Maglight here with the Hornby coaches. I think it does kind of highlight the interior of the Mark 5s. It does look better. The tabletops are painted. There's a softer tone on the plastic for the seating, and overall it actually looks better because of that. But the light intensity is more or less the same. It's maybe a tiny bit brighter. And when I did measure this with the light meter, I was getting a score for the Maglight of about 7 lux, and getting a score of around 8 to 9 lux for the Accurascale Mark 5. Now that was on the resistor settings that I was using with that coach. As I said, you can tweak that, so you can make it a little bit brighter, you can make it a little bit darker, and there is that trade-off. The brighter you make it, the more current you're drawing, and the more likely you're going to see intermittency with your lighting. So that's the trade-off. But overall, it's not a bad comparison, and with a little bit of work on the interior of the Mark III coaches, these look more or less the same, just a little bit brighter perhaps, as I say, on the custom lighting on the Mark V. At the very bottom we've got the Bachmann Mark IIFs. These are the DCC lighted coaches, and these look really bright in this particular photograph. So these were all taken with the same exposure settings, and I guess the exposure settings were optimal for the first two because of the level of light intensity that they show, but not for the Bachmann, because it is actually quite bright. And it gives me a reading of around 47 lux. So it's massively different. Like, it's 5 times the light intensity of the other two. You could say it's a bit too bright, and people do tend to tune it down because you can configure it by the CV settings, which is very good. Out of the box, it's a very bright effect, and you can see it there. And I guess the difference it makes is that in a bright room, it is very visible when you've got one of those Bachmann coaches that you've got coach lighting. You can see it because it is so bright, and you don't tend to see it as much on the other coaches. You have to kind of look down and look in, and then you'll see, oh yeah, the lights are actually on, but you can't really see it that much in as I say, a bright environment. That's the difference. Now, we're going to switch over to a dark environment, and actually this is the environment in which I did my testing of the actual light intensity, so obviously did it in this environment to get a correct reading. And again, I think it's pretty good. I mean, the settings, again, were optimized probably for the lower light of the first two cars that you see there, the Mark V, which again looks very good. And the Mark III Maglight looks really good as well. It's got the shiny seats, and they show up a bit more now because you got the dark environment. And again, it would benefit from a little bit of work maybe on the interior, but it's not bad. It's fine. It's better than I thought it might be. It's just a little bit less intense than the Mark V custom lighting that I have here, but not to be in any way. I think it doesn't really make a big difference. Again, the backman lighting, because we're using the same camera setting, is a bit more blown out because it's very bright, and it probably doesn't do justice to the interiors. The interiors actually look quite good. They line up with the actual windows, so you're not getting to see the seats like you're seeing them in the other two coaches, because they do line up with the windows. So unfortunately you're not getting as good a view of the backman coach, but it does look really good. But it is very bright. That kind of gives you a relative view, and I guess the upshot of all of this is that I think it passes the performance test, in my opinion. I would be interested in your opinion in the comments, but I think that, based on coach lighting that I've used and custom coach lighting I've used that I've put together myself, I think it's fine. I think the strip is fine, and I think that level of light intensity gives you a good compromise versus, your battery life. So I think it's fine. I could live with it, and from a performance perspective, it passes the test, I would say. It's not going to ever compete with the Backman Mark IIF DCC lighting. That is, the Rolls Royce, as it were, as I call it. But it's perfectly fine. Alright, so let's take a quick look at the poll results. This is the poll on the channel. You'll see this on my channel community page, and I'll put a link in the description to that. And there was kind of 4 questions asked, really, or 4 options given, I guess. The first was whether you'd be happy with the Maglight option as it stands, and only 6% are happy with that. So that's saying 94% aren't happy with it. 63% say they would prefer to have the lighting built into the coach, so that you literally can purchase the coach with the lighting onto the track, and you've got functional lighting straight away. You don't have to go and do anything. So 63% of people would prefer that, and I would assume that they would be prepared to pay the increment from that, a reasonable increment, to get that lighting capability. And this is what we're going to see now with the Mark IIB coaches that are coming from Accurascale. These are all going to have lighting fitted in them, so it will be interesting to see these. This will really could be a game changer, because typically Mark II coaches, Mark III, any coaches coming from the major vendors, with the exception of the DCC controlled coaches from Backman, and some coaches here and there, and some particular DMUs, etc., that have coach lighting. But in general, your standard Mark I, Mark II, Mark III coaches do not have lighting. You have to add it. So it looks like people would prefer to have it pre-fitted. 17% indicate that they would like to see pickups pre-installed so that they could add their own lighting. And I'm going to talk about that in the bonus section in the context of the Backman coaches, which had the DCC element and the lighting removed, but did retain the capability for the pickups so that you could add your own lighting in the future. So we'll take a look at that bit later. And, there's a percentage of people that might prefer to take that approach. And then there's 14% of people who don't care about coach lighting at all, and that's absolutely fine, and I can understand that. That's not a problem. You're probably not watching this video if that's the case, if you're in that segment. Okay, there are the poll results. I think they're quite interesting. They do really cry out, basically, that people would like to see lighting pre-installed. It's interesting that the Maglight number is so low. Maybe it might be a bit higher after looking at this video, perhaps, but it does strike me that it is coming out very low. People don't seem to be happy about it, and it would be interesting to understand the reasons for that. So please leave your comments if you're one of the 94% who isn't happy with a Maglight option, or not as happy with it as some of the other options. Then please maybe let us know the reasons for that. Is it the battery? Is it the lighting intensity? What are the things that are putting you off the Maglight option? And if it is the price, would you be happy to go with the third-party options that do the same thing? Again, maybe let us know in the comments on that one. Okay, let's take a look at a comparison, and this is looking at a comparison between the 3 options we've looked at. The Maglight, the rail-powered lighting, and the DCC-controlled lighting from Backman. So I did have a lux meter, which I did a test of the actual light intensity at the window of each coach. So basically put the meter up against the window, and I looked at the peak intensity of light in each case. Maglight scores a 7, a pretty consistent 7, which is not the brightest in the world, but it's still, I think, pretty good. And I think, as you've seen probably in the photographs, it's certainly acceptable. The rail-powered options, really these can vary a little bit, and that has to do with the amount of current draw that you configure them for, based on setting the resistor values, for example. In the coach that I tested here, which was one of the coaches from the Mark V set from Accurascale, that had a custom lighting added. So basically it had a different LED set added to the coach on top of the previous LEDs that were there. And it was giving a score of 9 based on the current limit setting for that particular LED strip. That can be tuned. You could make that probably a little bit higher or a bit lower if you wanted to. There is a limiting factor here though. As you make this higher in terms of the lighting intensity and hence the amount of current that's being drawn, it will increase the probability that you may see little stutters in the lighting as you go around your track, because it'll reduce the effectiveness of any storage capacitors that you have in the solution. So there is a trade-off there between this particular number and the amount of actual power storage that you have in your solution. The DCC controlled Bachmann coaches, and these were at the default lighting setting, which I think is pretty well the maximum setting or very close to it. And this was giving a reading of 47 lux at the window of the coach. So that is so much higher. These coaches are bright. They're probably they are too bright, and I think most people would tend to tune down the actual brightness level. But this just gives you an idea of the relative brightness number that you can get with them. And they really are the kind of Rolls Royce of lighted coaches, there's no doubt about that. If we take a look at the stability of the lighting, and this is basically any sort of flickering that you might see on the lighting, you won't see any of that with the battery. Essentially, you've got this stay alive battery in there, and you're not reliant on any pickups from the rails, or if there's dirt on the rails or anything like that. That's not going to have an impact for you. Your lighting is going to be consistent. So it gives you excellent results from a stability perspective. The rail-powered solutions do vary a little bit. They can be very good, particularly if you use both bogies, and that's really what you would want to do. If you're getting a factory-fitted version, it would be taking power pickup from both bogies, so you would have that. But if you're implementing it yourself, sometimes you might just try to get away with one bogie and maybe have a storage capacitor that's going to tide you over. And that can work reasonably well as well. With the Bachmann DCC coaches, again, these are rail-powered, so they are susceptible to oxidation on the track, that kind of thing. In general, they're very good because you do have pickups off every wheel, so they tend to be pretty good. The next section was the brightness control. There is no brightness control for the first two options, and for the Bachmann DCC controlled lighting, there is a CV settings that you can use that will set the actual brightness when you turn on the lighting in the coach. And that on-off control, it's controlled by a magnet with the Maglight option or with the alternative third-party options. They also use a magnet, the reed switch. The rail-powered, there really is no option. In general, the rail-powered configurations are always powered up. You may see a magnetic reed switch option with some of these from time to time, which is good. So that's good if you get that. And again, with the DCC controlled coach, it's the DCC function keys that turn on and off the lighting. And usually you can turn on and off the lighting across different areas of the coach. So it's not just the main internal coach area. There might be a guards area. There might be kind of vestibule areas at either end. And you can control all of these independently, which is very, very good and very powerful, of course. And then the relative cost. The Maglight itself is not cheap, but the third-party offerings are cheap. So if you go for those, you really are getting probably one of the lowest cost options for adding lighting. Rail-powered varies, and again it varies on the sort of quality and the number of pickups and whether you need new axles or not, or new wheel sets. So it does vary a little bit, but it is at the lower end, I would say. And you can raise that a little bit more if you start adding in storage capacitors, that kind of thing. DCC controlled is the most expensive. This will all be pre-installed. You've got the maximum level of control here. You've got the ability to fine-tune the brightness setting using a CV value. And these coaches are very nice coaches. They're very detailed. They run really well and they look really good. So overall, this is the kind of Rolls Royce option. If you can afford it, then maybe that might be what you would prefer. I didn't want to finish this review without looking at the issue of battery life and brightness. And this has to do with, one, how long you'll get out of a particular battery, and also the lighting intensity as the battery begins to drain. This tends to happen because the battery voltage will drop as the battery current is dissipated and the power from the battery is dissipating. And that voltage drop will manifest itself in terms of reduced light intensity. And I did see this. So just to fact check, I guess, the CR 2023 lithium batteries, they typically have a capacity of between 210 and 240 milliamps, which would mean a current of 0.5 milliamps to get you to the 500 hours. Now, I didn't actually do a current measurement on this, but 0.5 milliamps from my experience looks to be pretty low, and I would suspect we're drawing closer to 1 milliamp for the sort of light intensity that we're seeing, because that would correspond to what I see with other lighting solutions. Now, you could have particularly efficient LEDs, which would give you more brightness for a lower current. That's fine. However, I did leave this running for 5 days, which is 120 hours. And after that, I did find a noticeable drop-off in the light intensity. Straight away, you could see the difference between the other cars, whereas originally this looked pretty well similar to most of the other custom lighting solutions that were track-based that I had. Once I left this running for 5 days and went back into the room in the darkness, I could see a noticeable difference. And when I measured it, I was looking at a measurement of only 1 to 2 lux. So you've seen a drop off of down to maybe 20-30% of what the original lighting intensity was after only 120 hours. So can you imagine what that would look like after 300 or 400 hours? I don't think this thing is going to give you 500 hours of usable light. At 120 it was still usable. It was dimmer, that's for sure, and it was noticeably dimmer. But if you had a whole train with the same light intensity, I think it would be fine. You could still live with that. It would start to become an issue if you had replaced or had to replace the battery on one of the cars, for example, and it then stood out as more bright than the others, and it would do so. Then I think that could be an issue for you. So I guess the figures of 500 hours, to me, they look like marketing numbers, and I don't think you're realistically going to get those in real life. Fine, you may find particularly efficient or high capacity 2032 batteries, but they are quite limited. I mean, that form factor is small. If you're just going with the lithium types, you're going to be sitting in that range that I mentioned. So I can't see that there's any magic there that's going to give you potentially 500 hours of satisfactory usage. It's going to be less. You're going to have to change the batteries more frequently. And if you do mix batteries of a different lifespan on a given train, then there'll be a noticeable difference in the light intensity between different cars over time. Okay, thought I'd cover that because it's really important, and I think this is one of the reasons a lot of people are maybe put off by battery-based solutions because of this fact. I certainly am. It's one of the reasons I wouldn't go with a battery-based solution in general. So that's it, and as I said, I did see this in real life. Okay, so let's get into our summary. And I guess the first thing is that Hornby's Maglight option, it is easy to install. It does provide a very stable, good light quality with no concerns over track connectivity. And it will give you that certainly in the early stages of its lifespan. Now it will fall off, as I said, over time. And it still was usable for me even after the 120 hours. But you would want all the cars in the given train to have the same intensity, I think, is what you'd want. Now, what it looks like after 300 or 400 hours, I would say it's going to be very, very dim. You're going to be in the sub 1 lux type range, and it'll still be noticeable that you have lighting, but it will be very dim. And I guess the question then is, do you start replacing those batteries after 200 hours perhaps, or even less? That's kind of the question. And you can get them pretty cheap from different sources, but obviously, if you're going to be using them a lot and having your trains like running over long periods of time, and you not wanting to have to power down all the coaches every night, then there's an extra overhead there for that. So I did find the Maglight option to be decent in general, aside from that particular limitation. And I wouldn't dismiss it as a result, because if you're only going to be using your layout infrequently, and maybe you're going to use it once or twice a week for a number of hours, these batteries are going to last potentially quite a long time, and you'll probably be fine with them, given that they're relatively cheap, particularly if you go with the third-party options, and the lighting quality is pretty good, at least in the early stages of the battery life. However, if you can't see yourself living with that drop off in lighting intensity over time, and you're just not happy about it, then you've really got no option but to go for the trackpad options, or start changing the batteries even more frequently, like less than 100 hours of use. Some people might be happy to do that, but you physically have to take these coaches off the track. You have to open the battery compartment and swap out the batteries. So that's what you'd have to be doing to do that, and you'd be doing that on a more frequent basis then. So I would tend to think if that's really an issue for you, you're going to want to have the coaches lit from the track, and you're going to want the capability to be able to use that very easily, either built into the coach or have an easy upgrade option for that. So that's it. So it is worth considering. You definitely need to look at the third-party options because they're significantly cheaper. They're like a third of the price. So if you're going to do a full rake of 10 coaches, you'll want to save the money that's involved in that. Particularly this downside, I would say, in terms of the battery life and the drop off in performance, the light intensity with the age of the battery. And it just will steadily get worse and worse and worse until it's, effectively, very little light left. So it's really up to yourself to decide what's going to work for you on your layout, and I wouldn't rule it out if you think in your environment that's going to be working fine. Then I think there's nothing wrong with the actual lighting intensity when the battery's at a good charge. So I certainly wouldn't have any concerns with that. So it's going to be up to yourself. So please let us know in the comments, I guess, which one of these issues could be the deal breaker for you with regard to the Maglight, or if you've contributed to the poll, what was the rationale behind the decision you made. I'd certainly like to hear that from people in the comments. I can only speculate, and I can only speak for myself, obviously. I think in my own case, I would personally find it difficult to see that sort of drop off in intensity. But again, if there was particular coaches I was only using infrequently and the lights were going to be off all the time, well, then I wouldn't kind of maybe rule out a battery powered option, a cheaper one, obviously, than Maglight. I'd probably be fine with that. It does depend on your usage. It depends on your own preferences and what you're happy to live with and what you're not. And I think only an individual modeler can make that decision. I guess what I want to call out here is to present the issues and what works, what doesn't work, and people that can then make up their own minds what's going to work for them. And that's the most important thing, what works for you on your layout. Okay, so feedback in the comments. Thanks for joining this video today. I hope it was of use. It's one of those topics, I guess, the whole area of coach lighting, which people have different opinions on. However, I think from the poll results, I think we can see that there is a kind of a common theme coming through in terms of pre-fitted lighting, and we're going to see that coming from Accurascale with their Mark IIs, and I guess that could set the standard or could set a bar for the other vendors going forward. And I'm not talking about having coaches that are crazily priced. I'm talking about coaches that are probably a little bit more expensive than the norm today because they've got a new capability built into them, but aren't at the sort of ridiculous price of the DCC controlled coaches from Bachmann. So probably somewhere in between there is probably where we're going to get to with lighted coaches. But thanks to everybody who completed the survey. I think that feedback is very invaluable, and I would hope that manufacturers who maybe tune into the channel from time to time would take a look at it and factor that in their own plans for future models. I think we'd all certainly like to see certainly at least enablement of lighting in the coaches, if not even having an option to have lighted coaches in the future. Okay, thanks for joining. Talk to you again on the next one, and in the meantime, take care and happy modeling. Okay, so a lot of people chose in the poll to have a coach, one that had the coach lighting pre-installed, and the other would be that the coach was enabled to facilitate the addition of coach lighting. So we're going to take a look at one such coach. It's this guy, the 39675 from Bachmann. It's one of their British Rail Mark II F coaches. There's one version of this that has DCC installed and lighting. This is the version that doesn't have, but it does have the kind of enablement for lighting. And I guess that's what we want to take a look at in this coach, is what have they done in this coach to make it easy for you to add your own lighting if you subsequently wanted to do so. Now, these aren't cheap coaches, but they are good quality coaches, I guess, and that's, I suppose, why people are attracted to them. They're got a very nice feel to them. They're a very detailed coach, nice interiors, etc. So this is not a DCC enabled coach, but you see what we've got here. So we've got the pickups that you would get on the DCC coach are actually pre-installed here. You see there, and the way they're actually mounted is very nicely because they're picking up the actual wheel axles there. And you can see there's an insulator here between the two, and so we've got power getting picked up on all wheels. So this is giving us very good coverage, and if you look down here, it's the same. So this is really good. This is better than you'd do if you're doing your own coach lighting. Whereas typically you'd have one axle picking up on one bogie, one of the plus, and another axle picking up the minus. Whereas this is, you've got actually 4 contact points for the plus, 4 contact points for the minus, versus just one on what you might typically do on your own coaches, unless you wired in the second bogie. Okay, so this is really good. So I guess what we've got to do here now is we're going to need to open up this coach. Okay. We're nearly there. We'll just get this guy off. Well, I have short nails today, so this has been a bit of a harder job than it would normally be. It's a bit easier if your nails are a little bit longer. So now we've got the body of the coach off. It's a nice body, is well painted on the inside, so you shouldn't get any light bleed on this. So there should be no need to do any extra work. I think if you look at the interior, you've got the tabletops, you've got the seating, which is all quite nicely done. And so let's see what access we have to the contacts underneath. Okay, so we're going to take out these screws in the base because we want to get access to what's underneath. There's 3 of these. These are nice coaches, there's no doubt about it. You pay your money and you get a very nice coach. Okay, so we're going to lift him up. 3 of the screws. Okay, so that's him. That's the seating with the tabletops, etc. So what have we got underneath here? So we've got our weight, because this is a bit of weight in this coach. So do you see these 2 contacts here? You can just kind of see them as I rotate. So if you connect onto those, that's going to give you the right and left side of the track voltage. Okay, and you can see it on both sides. Probably a thing to note as we've got this open like this is the quality of the return spring here in this kinematic coupler. See, it's a very nice little assembly, and it's a better quality than we saw on the Hornby Mark III coaches. So that's just kind of an indicator of the quality of this coach. So connecting your contact wires onto these, routing those wires then up into the body of the coach, and you're going to have a little rectifier circuit. You'll probably bring your wires up through this, probably group them together, bring them up through here, and then probably have your circuit in either, probably in there, actually there's a bit of room in there, or at the very back here. Have your little circuit with your capacitor and diode bridge feeding your LED light strip. Now, the LED light strip on this, you've got these 2 posts here, so you're going to have to negotiate those. You don't want to, they're actually superfluous, they don't connect to anything. They would have been connecting to the PCB that used to sit here, that the LED lights on one of the lighted versions of these coaches would reside. So it would be up to yourself if you wanted to put an actual, let's say a little plastic strip or something across there with your LEDs on them and screw them in, which would be equivalent to what's done in the full version of this coach that has the DCC control. So and then bring up your wires from whichever side you've chosen to wire in. You can see there's a toilet there, so that's actually blanked, so you're not going to see anything. If you were to reside a little bit of a circuit in there, you won't see it. There's no open window, so that's probably where you do it. So that's it. So it takes the hard work out of getting new axles, connecting to those axles, and if you want, you're not going to get the same level of connectivity as this coach is giving you, because it's got every single wheel has got a contact on it, and so you're going to get very good connectivity for your lighting. So wouldn't it be good if every coach you purchased had something like this, and had, at least at the level of the wheels, had the contacts and had the, in this case they're not using live axles, they're insulating the two ends of the axles, and they're taking an actual, you can see it there, where they're actually connecting in, which is really good, because you're getting a metal to metal contact, so that you're getting a very good wheel performance. You're not getting the kind of drag factor that you'd normally get on a wiper type arrangement. So these are very efficient from a drag perspective, from like a coach resistance perspective. So that's it. Taking a look, probably one of the best in class at doing this. Maybe you don't need it quite as good as this, but having the wheels pre-ready to wire into your circuit is a huge advantage. It's half of the job of adding coach lighting, because you do spend a lot of time messing around connecting up. You probably have to get new axles, for example, or new wheel sets. You've got to connect to the axles, you typically, and then wire that in. Whereas here, you can just pick up from here and away you go. All right, thought I'd show you that, because that's kind of what a lot of people would like. If they're not going to get it built in from day one, they'd probably like the option to add their own, and this facilitates adding your own. Okay.